Hello and welcome to Comics with B and W. They're Bobby and I'm Wilson, and on today's show we're going to be discussing Dead Legends, a comic from publisher A Wave Blue World, written by James Maddox, with art by Gavin Smith, lettering by Ryan Ferrer, and edited by Joseph Illich. Alright, so our first episode. Welcome, Bobby.
Hello.
Okay, just so the audience is aware, Comics with B&W will focus primarily on indie comics from publishers
The
like...
best indie comics.
The best indie comics, absolutely. From publishers like Image, Boom, Ahoy, Away Blue World, so many great indie comics.
The ones you aren't reading, because you're reading DC and Marvel instead.
And to be fair, we both also read Marvel and DC, but there are already so many, shows and podcasts talking up those books. So to try to be a bit different, we decided our singular focus would be on indie comics that we love and that we think more people should be talking about.
They deserve the appreciation, and too often they don't get it because they're simply overshadowed and don't have the marketing.
Exactly. Before we get started, let's do a little bit of background on us. Bobby, you can go first.
Hi, Bobby. I have been a comic fan since I was little, basically as long as I can remember. Was introduced to comics through the Silver Age Legion of Superheroes, of all things. And, well, despite mostly being into DC as a kid, I've since branched out into Marvel, and especially the indie scene, which has only gotten more appealing over the years.
Yep.
And you, Wilson?
All right, and for me, I've been reading comics since 2015. So for about 5-6 years, I started, and to be fair, I knew of comics and, Spider-Man, Superman, all the great comic book characters, but I started with Edge of Spider-Verse #2, the first appearance of Spider-Gwen. I randomly saw an article that Spider-Gwen was getting a solo series, and I just really liked her look, so I looked her up, and then that's when I started reading comics. So I've been reading mostly Marvel, DC superheroes, but the past couple of years I've been going into a lot more indie comics, and doing this show especially is going to make me read more indie comics even faster, because I really like the indie comic scene, so I'm really excited to really dwell pretty deep into that.
And as far as books we've already read, reading them again can give all sorts of new appreciation, like with today's subject.
Absolutely. Like we said in the intro, we're talking about Dead Legends. It's a martial arts, kung fu inspired comic. It has incredible action, interesting characters. It's a revenge story with a tournament setting. So what we're going to do first, we're going to do a non-spoiler discussion for the people who haven't read the book and just want, a quick overview. So first off, read the book. Like, wow. But no, let's...
Yeah, non-spoiler review. It's one of the best comics of the last few years. At least, well, I'm not going to give a dumb rating, but because that's for the end. But it gets the highest recommendation we can get.
It really does. And that's why we decided to start off with it, because it really is that good. It follows the character. Her name is Yan Nakamura. And like I said, it's a revenge tale. She enters this tournament purely to revenge the death of her husband. That's probably the most bare bones, non-spoiler way to describe this story as of right now.
That's all covered in the first issue. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and honestly, if you read any summary, that's there. Like, that's sort of what that is. And
I think it's even on the back of the trade. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to go more into non-spoilery territory, the thing I think that really makes this book shine, and this is something we talk about on Twitter all the time, is that the narrative itself is character driven.
Oh yeah, for sure. On first reading, I actually thought some of the supporting cast was less fleshed out than it could be, but even then, and with my opinion having changed on that,
yeah,
the two leads of the book, as well as the primary antagonist, are all beautifully enjoyable and fleshed out.
Yeah, and that's the thing for me. I'll wait to the spoiler section to talk about the supporting cast especially, but Yan, the entire purpose of her is so singularly focused and so driven that when the certain thing happens, I'm so bad with non spoilers. When certain thing happens at the end, it that could have basically been against what her character had been so far, and they don't forget what her character was about. I very much love how that ended. And then the other character, I believe you're talking about Red Death, right?
Yes.
Yes. I love her look. I always loved her look from the beginning when they were, teasing the project. So I always figured she would be a favorite character of mine, and she was. But she's another great character, which, in my opinion, her arc was actually a bit more plot driven right up until it wasn't. And
I think that's fair, but at the same time, even though her story was more plot driven, she still had personality in spades.
Absolutely. Maddox is great with writing these two characters, because, especially Red Death, because he still makes her a character first. He didn't allow the plot to overwrite necessarily what her own motivation was and what her own character was.
Yeah, just to clarify, this is something Wilson and I talk about a lot in our private discussions.
Yeah.
We hate when a comic lets the plot just run everything in spite of pre-established character motivation, which is something you unfortunately see a lot.
Yeah, it's sort of it's a huge pet peeve of both of us, where it can ruin a comic, honestly. You could have a cool character, but the second that character is beholden to the plot, it ruins the comic for me, for both of us, really.
So if I could make some comparisons to you for what you might be getting out of this, if you like DC's Lady Shiva, you're gonna love Red Death, and this comic as a whole is very much a tribute to and inspired by the classic kung fu films, most specifically Enter the Dragon, and it knows what it is. It doesn't try to be too cheesy, it doesn't try to be too tongue-in-cheek, or be as, well, blaxploitation-y as that movie was.
Yeah.
Instead, paying tribute to it while also acknowledging its flaws.
Yeah, and a thing I think is sort of underrated just in terms of how you tell a story, especially in today's, is that it's not too complex. It's not trying to think it's smarter than you or smarter than what it's inspired by either. Like it's clearly inspired by the whole genre of kung fu and martial arts tournaments and just all those types of genres and movies and shows that we've seen throughout the years, and video games that we've seen throughout the years. And it's not trying to be better or smarter. It's trying to tell its own story just within that landscape as well, and place itself within that. So it is a basic story, but if you can tell a basic story well, then that's all you have to do, and just throw in great characters and throw in great motivation, and you'll be considered great. And I think too many comics think it has to tell a complex story, and it loses a lot when it does that sometimes.
Especially in a mini-series, that's a bad idea. It's an easy way to just lose the reader and keep them from getting invested.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a 5-issue miniseries. And another thing we talk about in our private discussion a lot is pacing. The pacing in comics is terrible. In way too many comics, it is terrible. This does not have that problem. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have the problem of when I read an issue, I feel like nothing happened. And that's something that happens a lot with especially Big Two comics, where the James Maddox, Gavin Smith, they really make sure every issue, the plot is moving forward, the character motivations and plot is moving forward. They're doing also good world building within each issue. I always feel like I'm learning something new, and I'm getting my money's worth, basically. That's how I always feel like. I always felt like I was getting my money's worth going throughout this entire series all the way up to the end.
Which is frankly an achievement when you consider that this is a martial arts comic, and you might think that there's not room to fit enough plot and characters in with all the action that must be happening, but the fight scenes never outstay their welcome. Even the longest fight, which, a slight spoiler, takes up an entire issue of the book, does not feel like it's lacking any plot advancement or character development.
Yeah, absolutely. They did a great job balancing the action with the character. There are still some great intimate moments and personal moments for all the characters, and by the end of the book, you know who these characters are, and that's the important thing. And action should be used to support the characters that are there and that you're using. And that's what this book does well, especially in the issue, which we will talk at length in the spoiler section that Bobby is talking
But before we get to the spoiler section, since we're talking about the action, we probably should talk about the art, because me oh my, is the art in this bloody incredible.
Wow, okay. So the art, you can't say enough good things about this art. Gavin Smith is already, and I think this is probably the only book I've seen him as an interior artist in as of right now, but he's already a top tier artist for me purely off this book alone.
Agreed completely.
Like we've said, he put this team on Lady Shiva. Like, I don't understand why that hasn't already happened. But the art is, and as far as I know, Gavin also did the coloring for this. Otherwise, we would say who the colorist is, but there is no colorist listed on the book. So I'm assuming Gavin also did coloring for this.
Yeah, I think so. And that is just even more impressive because along with having some of the best choreographed and most detailed, gritty fight scenes you'll see in a comic now or 20 years in the past, the coloring is... I'm not even sure how to describe it. Wilson, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, wow. Okay, so the coloring is... It's vibrance without being comic booky vibrance, I guess. You know, it's visceral. Like,
I guess it's sort of over the top, but still, it's not drab, it's not gray. The colors are diverse, but they're dulled just enough that they don't mesh, that they mesh with the tone well.
Exactly. Like, it's a good grounded, vibrant type of coloring where everyone has their own unique style, everyone has their own unique look, and then when you get to the fights, you don't lose what's happening in the fights. And that's a big thing for me. So like the paneling itself is gorgeous. One of the big things in fight scenes that happens a lot with pretty much any comic, honestly, is... Or
any form of medium, I assume, if I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just you lose what's going on in the fight scenes. And that's, you know, that's a huge
Modern Hollywood,
thing.
Take notes.
Seriously, like, and it doesn't, and again, it's one of those things where when we was talking about the story is basic, this is sort of a basic thing where it's just like, you can just follow the fight scenes. And it's not, you don't have to overcomplicate fight scenes. Like, stop trying to overcomplicate everything. It's okay to just tell a basic fight scene with two great characters. And then,
even whether they're a single page spread across a million panels, or, as I alluded to before, there is a single issue that's just an entire fight scene. There is not a single line of dialogue spoken of it, and yet it tells you a complete, detailed story.
Exactly. And I don't know many, let alone many writers that can pull that off, but many artists that can pull off doing something like that in today's comic book landscape. So to see Gavin pull it off, to not lose the characters in doing so, to not lose the story in doing so, was breathtaking. It was so good.
Agreed. And one other thing I have to say about what separates it from a lot of other fights you see in comics and other media as a whole is the styles of the characters. They're not just doing generic martial arts that you could see just by watching an action movie. No, every character has their own distinct fighting style, and it's rooted in, actual martial arts.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's something else, like I said, like, you never lose character. You know who these characters are, and fighting style is a huge part of that. And that's something that is lost a lot when people are writing martial arts characters. They just say, hey, they throw a punch, they throw a kick.
Guilty in my own work, I'll admit.
Oh, everyone's done it. That's sort of a learning thing that I think people have to educate themselves on. It's just that there's so many different fighting styles. So it's just one of those many things that when someone does it correctly, you have to give them the props for doing that.
I think the biggest example in this book would be a character named Barboza. He gets very little to do in the story itself. You could cut him out easily, but just watching him fight in the few brawls he gets, you learn everything you need to know about him.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, like you said, he gets very little to do, but then at the end, they tease basically what he's going to be, and so I'm actually excited to see. I guess spoiler, kind of not spoiler, but there is a sequel coming to this book.
Dead
coming out.
Legends 2 in 2021 later this year.
Yep.
We cannot wait.
Coming out this year, and we are so excited. He's going to be in that, and it teases what's going to happen with this character and a lot of the supporting characters, really, that they tease that there's going to be more with them. So even though they didn't get much to do in this one, we do know that there's still more to be done. And
be it a single endearing line of dialogue, or like I said with Barboza, his cool fighting style, you get endeared to them despite, so you're still excited to see more of them.
Exactly.
All right, should we move on to spoilers?
I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
All right, so just to close out, amazing book. Check it out. You can get trades at your local bookstore or comic shop. If they don't have it, you can order it. And you really should get this through legal means. These creators deserve your support. We want more books like this.
You can go to a Wave Blue World website. I know they have it up. You can get it on digitally on Comixology. It's available to be got legally.
Yeah, get it on Comixology if you just have to get it like that. But I have the trade in my hands right now. It is very high quality. I highly recommend picking that up if you can.
Nice. Let's get into spoilers now.
Hey, spoilers. Now we can actually talk about stuff without being vague.
I'll start with spoilers. I will say, because I didn't have too much negative in the non-spoilers, I'll start with a negative for me, and that's Blind Tiger.
Blind Tiger, obviously, if you're still listening at this point, you know who the Blind Tiger is. He is the main villain of the book. He's the real main villain.
He's the main villain. So Blind Tiger kills... Hold on, let me look for the guy's name. That kills Yushi Nakamura, who was the husband of Yan Nakamura, and that's why it's a revenge tale, because she enters this tournament purely on the motivation to kill Blind Tiger. That is the entire purpose of her coming into this. And
however, while Blind Tiger has a pretty great design for a villain, he has about as generic a villain personality as you can imagine. He's sexist, he's a jerk, he cheats.
Yeah, and the big thing for me was I never felt like he was a worthy villain for Yan. Because they set up...
You didn't feel like he was ever a threat to her? Like she was going to beat him easily?
Yeah, because they set up that how skilled she is really early. Mm-hmm. So, and even though we know Blind Tiger, I'm not necessarily saying he's a slouch or anything, but when she went up against Damon, who we now know is the actual villain, and he's great.
We'll get to Damon in a minute, but I'll just say now, I bloody love Damon.
Yeah, I love Damon. But when I believe it's issue 2, she goes up against Damon, who they also establish as a great fighter in issue 2. They're like, well, Damon's like, whoa, she got a hit on me. There was contact. That doesn't happen. And I'm supposed to then think Blind Tiger, who cheats to win and it isn't comparable to Damon at all, is going to beat Yan. I don't know. That for me was just always a bit weird. They tried to up it a bit by saying Yan was pregnant, so she had, she might not be able to go full force because of that. But
right, yeah, they tried. But that's part of classic martial arts movie. Give the hero a disadvantage despite them obviously being more skilled.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's that they shouldn't have done that, because I think that's what you do, obviously. But Blind Tiger was just never a threat. The threat I think they tried to make him to be, for me. That's
fair. Personally, I felt he worked because on a character standpoint, like we know Damon was the real main villain, so he was just sort of a mini-boss in the end.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And so he served his role in the story, even if no one's going to write about him as a legendary villain.
Yeah.
And from a threat standpoint, I don't know. I felt like the story did just enough to make it feel like Yan might not be able to take him purely off the what was going on inside her. I felt that worked.
Yeah, I guess just for me, especially after the Red Death fight, I don't know. Just Blind Tiger just never struck was that. And I'm not saying the fight between, and then issue 5, Yan does go up against Blind Tiger. And I'm not saying that wasn't a good fight.
The fight between them is cool.
Yeah,
I think we could agree on that.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. It's a great fight. And I was very happy that, she kills him. And it wasn't like a no, I got to you, but you're gonna live and all that crap, because that happens sometimes in revenge tales where it's like they get to the end and then they don't get the revenge because it doesn't mean anything to them anymore or whatever. It's like, no, kill the guy. Like, you got this far, kill him.
Yeah, Yan is not a hero. That should be made very clear. She is the protagonist. She is a good person, but she is no hero.
Yeah, she very much was that the first movie of Deadpool when Deadpool shoots the guy. Like no, I'm killing this guy. But
yeah,
so I was happy for that with that. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah, a lot of stories nowadays will make revenge out to be toxic or not something you should ever pursue, but the story never judges Yan for her goal.
Absolutely. In fact, Red Death pushes and hopes that she does it. And it's like, good, I hope you kill that guy. Like, it's like, I really hope you get what you came here to, you do what you came here to do. And I was really happy that they let that happen, because if they didn't, I would have been like, that's weird. You guys pushed it all this way and then you don't let it happen. But that's just that was just a thing for me.
Yeah, since you mentioned your one thing, I only have one real critique at all.
Yeah.
Before we get back to gushing, because I assume we'll be doing plenty of gushing.
Yeah.
That would be the character of Ward.
Ward. Oh, okay. So let me just say something real quick before you get there. I was looking for that guy's name for so long, and I was like, where do they ever say his name? I'm like, where is this? And then
I was just looking back through the trade to find his name, because I just reread the book last night, and I'd already forgotten that.
Yeah, I was doing that this morning. I'm like, where is this? I went through every single one. I'm like, do they ever say his name? Then they did. I'm like, oh, wow. Like, God, this guy had nothing to do. But yeah, go ahead.
As a reminder, this is a book filled with great characters. Yan, Red Death, Damon, Barboza, Stalk, and then there's Ward, who is part of the main friend group early on, and is the big tragic death partway through the story, but we really don't get to know him at all before that happens. We just know he's best friends with Stalk, and that's basically it.
Yeah, Ward was the plot character. Like, those characters always exist, even in the best stories. You know, he is there because he tells Red Death about the organization itself that set up the tournament.
Exposition man.
Yeah, you know, and that's what he's there for. And then, like you said, then he's the tragic death. Like, he is the plot character that you had to create a character that needed to get some exposition out, and then die. That's what Ward's there for.
And you know what? Good on them for putting both of those roles into the same character instead of wasting our time with two.
That's very true, because a lot of lesser comics would have done multiple characters for what really didn't need to be multiple characters. And it's all one issue where that happens too, where he does the exposition and then he dies. So it's not
I thought that was across 2 issues.
No, he does it in 3, right? Hold on. I'm pretty sure it's just
Let's double check. We both have the book with us.
Yeah.
We can check.
Yeah.
It's in the same issue?
Yeah, it's issue 3. Because in the beginning, it starts in the beginning where Stalk is fighting, I think just some random person. And Red Death asks Ward, like, hey, you were going to tell me about what this tournament is. And that's when we get some more world building about what the tournament itself is and why, since Damon is, and how basically why Damon is the way he is. Because he controls everything. Because he won the tournament and he keeps winning and he's the champion. But we'll go more into Damon in a minute. But
and the lore itself, because, well, despite all our praise for it being a simple story with great characters, the book actually does set up a lot of lore for further stories to be told.
Exactly. Yes. And then, yeah, right.
It's pretty much all in this one quick flashback and exposition scene, but it's done very well.
Yeah, because and Stalk is someone who knew Damon from before he was a champion. So then that's how we're able to know who Damon was before. And then, so we get that world building of Damon's character and why he is the way he is now, which he's basically just a drunkard who kind of can't seem to find...
We're off on a tangent, but just to finish up, we were saying before...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Ward,
I have that.
If they could have had one more issue, I'm pretty sure Ward's death would have hit a lot harder. As it is, it's fine. You know a death like this is going to happen in this kind of story. It's just a shame we couldn't have gotten to know him better.
Absolutely. Especially since he is Stalk's best friend.
That does give us a small emotional tether on its own.
Yeah, it would have been nice.
We care about Stalk in that movie.
Yeah. And I agree that that's something that can be done better, where you don't just want to care about the character that lived, you want to also care about the character that died, because they just died.
Again, almost definitely just an issue of spacing. One issue would have been more than enough to fix that.
And that's what I'm saying, where it has great pacing. It's not perfect, but they realize, hey, we have 5 issues and we need to get this out. So we're just going to have to do it all. And this character needs to die. So we're going to have to do it all here. And that's one of those things where if you know what you're doing, you at least pace it in a way where you can get it done. And that's what they did. They got what they needed out in the pace in which it needed to be. But unfortunately, doing that sacrificed a little bit of character.
But that's basically it for problems. Wilson, you got any other problems with this book?
I mean, honestly, like and honestly, those problems aren't book destroying.
They're not nitpicks, but they're not huge deals either.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I've seen so much worse. I don't really have any other issues with the book overall.
There's nitpicks and just a little weird stuff. Like I noticed sometimes the word fuck is censored and sometimes it isn't.
Oh, really? I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, just weird little things like that, but that doesn't matter.
Really doesn't matter, as I didn't even notice that was a thing that happened. Like, I wouldn't be surprised. That's just sort of a weird thing to do, but it's not necessarily like a mark off the book itself. It's just kind of like, I wonder why they did that.
If any of the editors or people who worked on this book end up listening to this podcast and hear what I just said, I wonder if they ever actually noticed.
I don't know. It might have been just a sort of they meant to either always have it there or always edit it out, but then just forgot which one it was and then just let it go.
Okay, so gushing time. Where do you want to start?
I want to do actually a little bit of background because I want to start basically with what I consider one of the greatest single issues I'll say one of my favorite single issues of comics, and probably my top 2 favorite fight scenes in a comic. And that's with issue 4. Is a completely silent issue. And I just want to say before we talk about it, though, I remember, because we read this in different ways, because I read this month by month as it was coming out. And then you went and you read it later after it was over.
Yeah, I actually had a run-in with Joseph P. Illidge, the editor of the book at Anyone Comics in Brooklyn, and it was after talking to him that I was inspired to finally read the book after hearing so much good stuff about it.
Yes, because I remember you asked me, I think after issue 3 had come out, you asked me about whether or not you should read it. And at the time, even though I liked it a lot, at the time, because I know how we are when it comes to comics, I didn't recommend it because I was like, it's not there yet. It's good, but it's not there yet for me to recommend it to you especially, because I just know how we are.
Yeah, we have very similar tastes in comics in general. That's something you'll learn as this podcast goes on. We more than often than not agree on these things.
Yes, so I wasn't there yet, but at the time they had been, and only people I really saw talking about it was me and Judge, who runs the Let's Talk Lady Shiva account on Twitter.
Follow them, by the way. They're awesome.
They're great. They still talk about Dead Legends all the time. And so we were kind of the only ones really talking about it. And Gavin and James have been promoting the fact that issue 4 was going to be a silent issue. And they were really talking about that like a lot. So I was excited about that. And I was like, if they can land this issue, then, and if it's as good as they seem to be saying it's going to be, then I think it can be something I can recommend to you, to everyone. So I want to start talking about that issue because they landed. It landed. Like, I'd never been so in awe well, that's not true. I was if you haven't read Batgirl with Cassandra Cain, you should read it. But
yeah, that's the best fight scene in all the comics, but this is definitely the best fight scene in a comic since Batgirl vs. Lady
Seriously. Because at the only word spoken in that issue is damn. And I remember thinking, damn. Like, I can't believe...
It's the only real appropriate reaction because...
It really is.
If like we said before, if you've listening to this part, you've read the book, you know what we're talking about. You've seen how incredible this art is.
And we were speaking earlier about the panel work. This issue is nothing but spectacular paneling.
It's a masterclass in the art.
Oh my god. If there are any future comic book artists and writers, honestly, that want to do fight scenes that fight scenes is something they're really looking into, you need to read, even if you don't read any other issues of Dead Legends, you have to read issue number 4. it should be studied as to how to do fight scenes in comic books.
Even the coloring is a step above the rest of the book on top of the paneling with the various styles it takes on.
Yeah, the coloring.
They use every trick in the book, and some probably Gavin made up just to express as much emotion from this fight as possible.
The fight itself, it's between, again, we're talking spoilers here, so if you've read it, you already know. If you are listening, you haven't read it, then honestly, go read the book. It's between Red Death and Yan. It's literally one of the bloodiest fights I've seen in a comic, and
you would not get away with this in a big 2 book.
Oh,
no way.
Oh my god, because it's on a scale that's different than all the fights that were in the earlier issues too. And it's just between the two of them, but now there's a crowd. Now, you know, Damon's sitting on like a chair or like on a throne because he's the champion. The ring is bigger. Now it's like, oh, now we've gotten to the level of this is where an audience comes into play, and that's when they're now watching and there's more spectators. They're inside. I think the other ones were all outside.
And additionally, this is the first time either of these characters is really challenged. Like, you've seen them take a couple hits maybe before, but this is the first time you actually think either of them might have a chance at losing.
Absolutely. One of the things, especially with these two, because they, like I said earlier, with Yan being seen early on as a world-class fighter, so was Red Death.
Red Death is ridiculous, and I love her.
I know, like, she, from the top, was cutting up people with her sword and just saying, I'm the best here. And it's like, okay, who are you? Because it's like, I love you. Are
we agreed Red Death is the best character in this book? Just putting that out there?
Red Death's the best character. Like, I went in...
and it's... obviously, she's not just the badass. We get to learn a lot about her. We see her softer side with Yan and her caring for her child and protecting her. Yeah. We see her fun-loving side, whether she's just throwing rocks at someone. She's as much of a person as she is a badass.
Absolutely, and that's one of the things I was saying earlier. She's kind of there for the plot, but they made sure she was a character. And then one of the things I love at the end, I kind of go all over the place.
We'll get back to issue 4 in a second.
Yeah, but one of the things, just because we're on Red Death just for a second, in issue 5, after Yan beats Blind Tiger, when she decides to not fight Damon, and the Damon's like, fine, Red Death, you're going to fight me. Red Death's like, no, I'm not going to do that. And we learned that Red Death had been there, which plot related was to kill Damon. But the second
he paid her to kill him.
Yeah. That he paid her to kill him. And the second she says, no, I'm not going to do that, she completely disregards her plot and becomes her character. And I was like, yes. Like, that was such a great moment, because now it's like, hey, this entire plot you've been following with Red Death, it doesn't matter. You've been following her character. You know, it's like her character rules supreme over the plot that's happening.
And you completely understand why she's making the choice she is.
Exactly. And you need and there's a page in issue 4 where they give us I almost said Black Death, Red Death's background. In one page, you know who she is. Because it's from a punch from Yan, and you see that she was married, you see that her husband died, you see that she trained. She wasn't like Yan. Yan trained from her grandfather, so she has as a child, from I think it was 7 till she was like 18, like nothing but training. Whereas Red Death is already an adult and started training. So you see and she's much more of a murderous type of fighter than I think Yan probably was built to be.
Yeah, Yan has no problem with killing, but her style isn't meant for killing.
Exactly.
Red Death's, well, it's in her name.
Yeah, exactly. Like, Yan can kill, but that isn't really the point. But if she needs to, she can. Red Death, the point is that she wants to kill. But if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to either. So you see the difference between those two characters really early on. And the fight is just so good because it escalates in its bloodiness, basically, as it keeps going. And as it just goes through, and then, like you were saying earlier, the pages
become splattered in the blood, just getting more and more red and intense.
Yes, and as you were saying earlier, like, the coloring gets grittier and gets bloodier, like redder. Like, it's just so incredible how it happens. as we were saying with Red Death being a character, because she's fighting, you know, she's kind of in her zone. But the second she kicks Yan in the stomach, and we sort of just get that panel of Yan throwing up, you just see on Red Death's face, she's like, oh my god. And
what have I done?
Yeah, like basically, what have I done? And Yan takes advantage of it.
She is a mass murdering monster, but she's not a cartoon.
Exactly.
She has empathy.
Because, and then after that, Yan, you know, puts her in a chokehold, and then she taps out. Red Death taps out. You know, Red Death can keep going. You know that. And you know Yan can keep going, too.
But it isn't confirmed till the next issue that she purposely lost.
Yeah, that she allowed Yan
fight
to win. Basically, because, like I said earlier, too, Red Death wants Yan to do what she came here to do. She was hoping Yan wouldn't get in her way, but as the issue's going on, you see Red Death is sort of like, you know what, I'm not going to do this, actually.
It's kind of hard to talk about the story without just talking about the characters and fights, because the story is centered around fights.
Yeah, it is.
So what other fights? Obviously, no fight matches up to Yan versus Red Death. We already talked a little about Yan versus, I'm blanking on his name.
Blind Tiger.
Blind Tiger.
Yeah.
Were there any other fights that stood out to you?
Most of the other fights are sort of, they aren't bad in any way, of course, but they're kind of just there. But if I had to choose one, let me see, I have to find this guy's name again. It's still with Red Death, but it's Red Death versus Skin Snake, who is Blind Tiger's protege and is basically the reason Yan's husband Yushi dies. I don't know if you remember that one. It's in issue 2. It's a short fight, which of course it is. I think it's
he
only
never stood a chance.
Yeah, I think it's like I think it's one full page, but it's maybe like 2 pages in total as to.
Yeah, because we get her beating him up, him trying to cheat, and then her finishing him.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing, because Yushi, Yan's husband, basically called out Blind Tiger and Skin Snake for cheating. And the council was like, oh, wow, you're right. They did cheat. So then Blind Tiger's like goes and kills Yushi for ratting him out, basically. And then we see it again with Red Death, where they try to cheat again. But Red Death is having none of that and basically destroys his arm. I mean, completely. I don't know. Shatters isn't the right word.
It is not realistic at all. We should mention that. I very much appreciate how over the top this book was.
It was so over the top. And she just badgers him, and
body parts are blown away through just physical strikes. It's ridiculous.
It's one of the greatest things ever. But it just sets up her, because we didn't mention this in the beginning. Yan takes the name Red Death because she doesn't actually have any the invitation. Yeah, to be there, and then Red Death doesn't have the medallion, so Yan gets to stick around because she has the medallion, but she doesn't have an actual invitation because no one knows what her name is. But Red Death has to do this qualifying match, which is what the Skinned Snake match is, to prove that she can fight, basically. And it's like, are you actually Red Death? And then they see this and like, yeah, she is. So they're like, she's fine. She can stay.
Yeah, and as great as the ridiculousness of the exploding bones is, the funniest bit of this whole book is how Red Death lost her medallion.
Yeah, yes. That's a good one, too, in issue 1. Yeah, she is just on another job, I assume, and...
assassination, yeah.
Yeah, and basically the person was just giving her a little bit too much trouble, so she just went ahead and just got rid of her medallion and threw it at the guy's
threw it through his skull.
In order to make sure she completed her mission, because that's what it's about.
My favorite fight outside of the big ones, I mentioned him before. I just bloody love Barboza, so I really enjoyed his fight with Yan. He has nothing to do in this story. He is a pretty normal guy. But that just makes me wonder, where did a seemingly normal guy like this learn to fight so well with such a distinctive style, and what is he doing in this tournament?
And it's interesting too, because he gets... he doesn't necessarily get any hits on her or anything, but he doesn't go down immediately. Like you're saying, he has a good style. So
he's flashy. He's able to dodge her attacks easily.
Yeah. So it's one of those things. And then they do bring up him saying thanks for holding back against me. And then I also love at the end, he's the first person to say, after Yan decides she's not going to fight Daemon, that he's going to, and then Daemon, goes on his tirade, that he's going to help protect Yan and her child.
Yep, which is fitting with, parallel structure since he was the first character Yan met.
Exactly. So I think I agree. Like Barbossa, he's not the character you're supposed to walk away from really thinking about, but interesting enough that you're like, who is this guy? So I definitely hope he has, I'm assuming he's going to have more to do, but I definitely want
both
more.
Him and the final character we should talk about before we get to our big bad, Stalk.
I like Stalk. He's kind of just there to be the I don't know.
I know what you're trying to say.
I don't know.
How do we put this?
Yeah.
I mentioned blaxploitation before.
Because they talk about
he basically is there to pay tribute to the blaxploitation era of these kinds of films, and he hates that. He hates that Daemon brings him in for that reason.
Yeah, and they don't shy away from that because they mention Into the Dragon, they mention Jem Kelly, and he's upfront about the fact that he hates that he knows why he's there, and he's a good fighter. He trained with Daemon. We know he can fight. I think he makes it to the quarterfinals in the tournament. Yeah, which then he had to fight Red Death, which of course he lost, but he survived. All she did was choke him out. And
what can I say? I like him.
Yeah, exactly. So we know he's good. It's just one of those characters that wasn't really there for the fight scenes. That's what it is.
He's there to just add more to the group element. He's there to get us to care about Ward. He's there to really show what this book is trying to be and what it's paying tribute to.
Yeah. But he's still his own character. Then that's something we gush about because that's what they did. They still, not obviously like we said with Ward and my own personal thing with the Blind Tiger, but they still made sure with the people they knew was going to be at the end to give them some good character moments that could follow through all the way, so that
even just his establishing moment of winning fights is different from going up a whole tower of steps. Who he is.
Exactly. Because
it's a bit of a fat joke, but he's wearing a gi, so he's still a kick-ass fighter.
And he can still fight. And everyone has their own obstacles. I mean, I always, even though that is meant to be a fat joke, it is actually still a legitimate thing. Like if you can't make it up the steps, then you shouldn't be in this tournament. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those things where it does two things at once.
Did his humor mostly land for you, or did you feel it was a bit out of place?
No, for me it worked. It was kind of the only real humor in the book. There was some small stuff, like we said with Red Death, and
has a
Daemon,
bit of a dry sense of humor himself.
Yeah, but I think his humor was fine. I thought, for me, yeah.
It's not for everybody, but we liked it.
Yeah. I can understand if it wouldn't land. Absolutely, I can absolutely understand that. But for me, it was fine. It wasn't like belly laughing funny or anything, but it wasn't anything that I'm necessarily insulted or wish it didn't exist or anything like that.
Yeah, and we brought this up before we got to him. His past with Daemon gives us a whole new angle to look at him from.
Yeah, we've been kind of talking around it for a while now. Let's go ahead and just get to Daemon.
Yeah, Daemon, apart from Red Death, is the star of this book.
He really
I love
is.
Yan, but Daemon is one of the best villains I've seen in any indie comic in years.
Daemon's really interesting, purely because of his apathy. But
this is a man who's been the best for so many years, he is just sick of it. That's bored with life.
That's such an interesting take for a villain. You really rarely see a villain who's bored, and that's so interesting to me.
Villains who want their own deaths, that's nothing new.
Yeah.
But wanting that death not because, I hate the world, existence is miserable. No, he is just bored because there is no reason. He devoted his life to martial arts, and there's nowhere higher for him to go.
He he reached the peak, but he can't go down because he now sits atop the peak of the mountain hill of being the best fighter in the world, and it's like he's in such a higher class to everyone else that even people who try to fight him, he's drunk the entire time in this series. Even when they show his past and he's going up against people, he's drunk. And they say, but when he enters a ring, something just happens and he kicks their butt like crazy, and he's cursed with winning. That's what I think Stalk says it that way. He's cursed with winning, and he hates it. And I think that's
Great line. Great line.
Yeah, it's great. And it's such a great way of just setting him up, because they don't set him up as, well, they don't present him, I should say, first as the villain immediately.
Yeah, you actually like him quite a lot early on.
Yeah, they don't.
He's drunk from the start, but he's also very upbeat and endearing. He's happy about this tournament. He's being a good host.
Yeah, exactly, because he wants a great tournament, a great fight, purely because he is at least assuming and hoping that by the end someone's going to kill him. Like that is, especially once again, we said it before, at the end when we learn that he hired Red Death, you know that he's basically thinking and hoping this is it. This is the last thing that's going to happen with me. And then when he watches Yan kill Blind Tiger, he's like, "Oh, yes. You're awesome. I can't wait till you kill me." I think he said, like, "Give me a killer one-liner," because she says, I forgot what she said, but she says a one line, which of course,
I will find that very quickly.
Okay. But she said the one line, which, all the protagonists get that one line right at the end when they kill the antagonists of their life, basically.
Okay, I found the line. Listen closely as you tie, Tiger. When you see Ushi on the other side and he's laughing at your performance against me here, you be sure to tell him that I love him.
Yeah, see, that's a great line. And then Damon's like, yeah, he's so happy that
he's as excited about this kick-ass movie moment as we are.
Exactly. And he's just please, when you kill me, give me a killer line. Like, he's like just so ready. So when she's like, "No, I'm not gonna fight you," and you see it. It's actually a pretty small panel, but you see the shift in his entire demeanor immediately.
And it's unexpected, but it's natural, and it actually kind of hurts because you've grown to like this character. He hasn't been the villain you're worried about. That was Blind Tiger, and now suddenly you're seeing him for the monster he is.
Exactly, because now and there's something I think Stalk says too. He's like, your apathy has kind of destroyed what these tournaments were supposed to be, and he's like, "Oh, you want me to take an interest? Okay, fine." And it's like, "I'm gonna kill this woman now," and he's like, now you're just like, whoa, and you're like, whoa, he's like intense. He's like, this guy, and then that's when everyone's like, "No, I'll help protect her. And Yan's like, "Yeah, I don't care about you and being, in your power and being the champion of these tournaments." And he's like, "No, I only do this so that someone will kill me." And he's like, "There are two people here that have the closest possibility of doing that, and neither of you will do it." He is just yelling as they walk out that he is going to come for them, basically.
And then in the trade, you get an additional extra few pages where you see him rallying his students.
Yeah.
So he's got like a small army ready to come for Yan.
Exactly. And we talked about the sequel earlier. If you don't follow Gavin Smith on Twitter, you should, because
follow him and James Madden.
And James Madden, absolutely.
They're way cooler than us.
Absolutely. They've been teasing some art from Dead Legends too. It's just line art. I don't think I've seen any that have been colored yet, but oh my God. Like, it's
gorgeous. It's all issue 4 quality.
It's all issue 4 quality. The scale, the brutality, just the quality of it is like next level. And it's just like they're truly going next level with this with the sequel. And I just can't wait. And as they should, because they end it in a way where it's like more is going to happen and the stakes are going to be higher than they were in this one.
Yeah, this knew what it wanted to be. It told the story of the tournament. Now we get to see these characters out in the world that they've set up.
And we talked a little bit with the world building, and that's one of the things I think I appreciate is that they did the world building, because they easily could have just not done any lore, even though exposition, is tough to do, but not done any of that, where you just follow these characters in this tournament and they don't bother explaining anything, but they did.
Or they could have spent an entire issue detailing the backstory of the tournament and each of the crucial people who were a part of its history. But they know the crucial rule when it comes to world building. It's a seasoning, not an entree.
Yes. Because, the world building usually is only 1 to 2 pages. And like I said, even just with some of the backstory for characters, it's 1 page. But they get it all done. And as I said earlier, pacing is huge with me. And that is great pacing. All right. Anything else you want to say?
No, I think we're about ready to wrap up. But first, we have one very important duty. We have to give this a rating on our brand new scaling system. How many kicks to the face out of 10 will you give this, Wilson?
Kicks to the face, I give this 9 kicks to the face.
I will give this 9.5 kicks to the face. If you're wondering how you half kick someone in the face, it's where you don't make full contact. You just sort of graze them and maybe claw them with your toenails if you got them. I don't know.
That's so good. But yeah.
Okay, we hope you enjoyed this first installment, everybody. Before we go, we should probably tell you how to reach us. You can follow us on Twitter at Bobby L. Singer and at Dead Letter Poets.
What?
You can email us. Wilson, what's your email?
My email is smithwilson72@gmail.com.
And my email is samuel.singer98@gmail.com. And you can tell us on either through email or on Twitter what are some comics you'd like to hear us talk about. We will talk about any indie comic that is worth being read because someone's got to read it.
Someone's got to read it.
All right, everyone. Have a good day and take care.